So now, without further ado, tonight I am proud to present Nicola Yoon, who is celebrating the release of her book, One of a Kind. My phone is frozen here. She is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of Instructions of Dancing, Everything, Everything, and The Sun is Also a Star. She's also the co-author of Blackout. She's a National Book Award finalist, a Michael Prince Award recipient, a Coretta Scott King, John Steptoe New Talent Award winner, and the first Black woman to hit #1 on the New York Times Young Adult bestseller list. So we slap, yes. 2 of her novels have been made into major motion pictures. She is also the co-publisher of Joy Revolution, a Random House young adult imprint dedicated to love stories starring people of color. And she grew up in Jamaica and Brooklyn, which is the best borough in New York, and lives in Los Angeles with her husband, the novelist David Yoon, and their daughter. And she will be in conversation with Sabaa Tahir. Tahir is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Anne Ember in the Ashes series, which has been translated into over 35 languages. She grew up in California's Mojave Desert at her family's 18-room motel. There, she spent her time devouring fantasy novels, raiding her brother's comic book stash, and playing guitar badly. She began writing An Ember in the Ashes while working nights as a newspaper editor. She likes thunderous indie rock, garnished socks, and all things nerd. So please welcome our author and moderator. Now, thank you.
That was very nice.
Look, we have mics for the very
I know.
giant room.
These chairs, hold on.
Yeah, we're old, so getting in these chairs is actually more difficult than you might think.
Hello. Thank you for coming out, you guys. I always appreciate when people actually come and see me and us.
Hello, Nicola Yoon.
We've known each other for a while. The first time I met Sabaa was at one of my first events, and I drank alcohol. She drank tea until 3 a.m. Yes.
It was basically like love at first sight.
It was love at first sight.
Yeah, it was love at first sight. Yeah, now our families know each other and everything.
Right,
so.
like we took vacation for 6 weeks together, our families last year.
They got along, actually. The kids
They
got
really
along
did.
remarkably well.
Oh my God, they would not shut up.
Yeah, they talked a lot.
We
were like, please stop. I am so excited to be here for this wonderful, wonderful book, your adult debut, One of Our Kind.
Yay.
And I can't wait for this discussion. So I'm going to talk to Nikki for, 35, 40 minutes. So please, if you have questions, hold on tight to them because we're going to give plenty of time for you guys to ask. Okay?
Right. And questions are my favorite part of these events. So really, truly, I love being talking and actually hearing what you want to know and being in conversation. So don't be shy. Think of your questions. You can ask anything, almost anything. Yeah.
All right. So for anyone who's not familiar, will you please give us the pitch for One of Our Kind?
Okay, so it is my first book for adults, although I guess adults read the young adult ones too. And we've been pitching it as, it's a thriller for sure, as Get Out meets the Stepford Wives. And it's fairly accurate. Usually when you get comps, you're like, but this is deadly accurate. So it's about this woman named Jasmyn. She moves along with her husband and her young son to a town outside of Los Angeles that bills itself as a Black utopia. It's this very wealthy town. Everyone's Black, the janitors, the lawyers, the teachers, the venture capitalists, the policemen, everyone's Black. Jasmyn gets there and she feels a sense of safety and community. She feels understood. But then things start to get a little bit wonky. She expects that her neighbors will be social justice activists like herself, but mostly they spend a lot of time at the spa that's on a hill at the center of town.
Which we sympathize with,
Yes. And they don't really want to they're not very social justice-y. And the spa is fairly mysterious and very expensive. Her husband starts spending a lot of time there. She meets a couple other people who think this is strange as well, and they start to investigate. And Jasmyn's pregnant. Things are getting dangerous, so there's a ticking clock. she starts to investigate, things get pretty dangerous, and she has to figure out who really is one of her kind and who is not at all. That's the pitch.
I actually don't know the answer to this question, despite the fact that we've talked about this book for years now, which is,
Right.
what is the inspiration for this novel? Where did it come from?
Yeah, so it's, you know this because you are a National Book Award winner, Sabaa, Tahir. So you know that when people ask this question, like, you can sort of pinpoint where things come from, and I do actually very distinctly remember where the original idea came from, but a lot of it is also just sort of magic, right? Like, all these things come together, so it's like a true answer and also a mysterious answer. But the first thing I remember is I had this conversation with a friend of mine. So he's Black and an activist, and we had done this panel on race and racism. And then afterwards, we went to dinner, and we had wine, and over like too many glasses of wine, he had this one question, and he said, "Do you ever wonder who you'd be as a person and who we'd be as people if it weren't for the specter of race and racism?" Which is a big question and like a great question, but also kind of an impossible one, because it's hard to tease apart who you would be if everything were suddenly different, right? Like asking fish to imagine a world without water, right? So we talked about it for a while, and then we just drank instead, because there is no answer to this question. And so there was that. There was this Toni Morrison quote that I've known since I was a kid, when she says, "The very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you having to prove over and over again your reason for being." And I think that's a very formative quote for me, because I remember hearing it when I was like a teenager, maybe like 14 or 15. So there was that. And then, this is a long answer, I'm sorry.
That's great. I'm like riveted over here, so.
And then I was in the shower, which is where all good ideas come from. And I was listening to a podcast, and it's called You're Wrong About. And they were talking about this book called The Stepford Wives. And they were talking about how lots of people misremember that book because we use that phrase, "she's such a Stepford wife," to sort of beat women over the head with, like say that she's robotic. But actually the book is very, very feminist, and it's about the guys who would want their women to be robotic. Which I think I kind of knew, but I didn't really, because like I think I had never read the book and I only seen the movies, and I think the message gets a little lost. So then I'm in the shower and I scream because I have this idea, and my husband comes running in and he thinks it's a spider because I hate spiders. And honestly, I will burn my house down rather than deal with a spider. So he comes running in and I'm like, "Honey, the Stepford Wives, but Black." And he's like, "Interesting." Or he's like, "Not a bad idea." So all those things happen. And then fast forward to the summer of 2020 and George Floyd's murder. And then it's the fall and COVID's happening. And I was despairing. I was despairing about everything that had happened, about George Floyd. And I was really angry. And I wrote in 6 weeks the first draft of this book, which, okay, that has never happened before, will never happen again, because I am a slow writer. But I had been thinking about all of the questions in this book for such a long time that it just sort of came out. And then it took me another 3 years to make the book into an actual book, right? Because the first draft was just basically dialogue with them in space. And it didn't have any real heart and real people. It was just the ideas. And then, so 3 years to make it into an actual book. So that is a very long way of saying that's where it's from.
I did not know any of that, other than that you don't like spiders, which I relate to because I also am not a fan of spiders. So you have this spa in Liberty, in your utopia, and the mystery of Liberty kind of revolves around that spa. We have spa'd together. Why did you choose a spa specifically? Like, were you thinking about like body image? Were you thinking about wellness? Like, what made you decide that that was going to be a symbolic place in your book?
Yeah, so Jasmyn, the main character, she's a public defender, and she has a young son. He's 6, and she's pregnant. And part of the reason she moves to Liberty is because she's looking for safety for her son and for her husband and for herself, right? She's looking to go to a place where she expects that no harm will come to them, right? So she's looking for psychic safety and physical safety for her family. And I think that there is a tension that we all feel like in the modern world, right? I think that you can want to do the right thing. There's so many things wrong in the world, right? Like just read the news every day. And there's so many things wrong, and you want to fix it, but also you have to take care of yourself, and you have to take care of your family. And I think we all feel this tension. And I think that if you're Black and dealing with racism, and a Black woman who's trying to protect your kid, there's another layer that you have to deal with, and you want to fix it. In order to keep her son physically safe, she has to take away a little bit of his innocence by like giving him the talk and telling him, like, you're going to love a world that's not always going to love you back. And like, that's a hard thing to do, right? And so there's a tension between like taking care of the world and wanting to take care of yourself that I think that we all feel. And so that's why I wanted to put it at a wellness center, right? It's like there's like this notion of self-care. And is self-care community care? Is it only selfish? Like, what is it? Like, what are we doing when we talk about this? So, and I don't necessarily have the answer to these questions, but the book tries to point at these questions just over and over again so that we will think about them.
So one of the things I love about your writing is your characters are always very layered. And a lot of times they believe something like really firmly. And then as you go through the book, you sort of realize, or they realize like, oh, maybe that wasn't so set in stone as I thought.
Yeah.
And I think that Jasmyn is no different. She's a very flawed character. Yeah. Sometimes she's super right and sometimes she's super wrong. So I guess I'm wondering, what was it like to write such a flawed character? And why did you decide to make her pregnant? Like, that's a very specific feeling for women and something that they go through. Like, why did you decide to put her in that particular sort of space in her life?
All right, so the answer to that second thing is because I'm evil and I want to, like, because like you're so vulnerable when you're pregnant, and this is a thriller, right? This book is meant to keep you up all night, and
it did. It did.
And when you get to I've been doing a lot of interviews and press, and people like read it all at once, and then they have very big feelings at the end, very big. And I mean, I did that on purpose. But for Jasmyn, I mean, she is my most complicated character, I think. And I think we all are, right? We all make mistakes all the time, right? Like, and we are contradictory. Like, I can believe two mutually exclusive things at the same time. And I think that we all feel that way. And so Jasmyn is often right and often wrong. She tries too hard sometimes. She's very judgy. But we're all like that, right? Like, we all have to live with contradiction. I think about, like, I have my phone, right? And we all have our phones, and we all know the labor practices around making phones aren't great. And global warming is happening, and I'm on tour, and I fly every day, right? So to live in the modern world is to live with contradiction, it's to live with a kind of hypocrisy. That's not no one's fault, but it is what we have to live with, right? Like, you always have to deal with that. And so that's the space that Jasmyn's in. She's trying to do the right thing all the time. And is it to her detriment sometimes? Like, does it make you put blinders on? The book is a lot about like a system that would put her in that position and put us all in a world where we believe one thing and have to act contrary to those beliefs because we just live in that world.
Can you talk a little bit about something that does come up in the book, which is this paradox of how racial identity will define us even as it kind of promises to set us free from stereotypes?
Yeah, I mean, this is, so much of life is just a duality, right? I mean, like, I think that when I was growing up, one of the things you wanted to do, like if you're a feminist or whatever, was just like, you get to be whoever you are. Like, you're not defined by being a woman, you're not defined by Black, you're not defined by your sexuality. Like you get to know the person, right? And I think more lately, like we are leaning into identities, and I think it's interesting. I think some people find it freeing. I think some people find it restrictive. But I really want to like look at that, because if I say to you, like there is a gay brown girl who's Mormon, like we know those things about her, but we don't know her, right? And I think there's a way in which we say, oh, we know everything because of these categories now. And I think it can be freeing and also confining. Like I look at my little girl, and so she's a ridiculous creature. She's 12.
12 is tough.
She's 12, and oh my God. And she's so adorable, but I can see assumptions being made about her when she's in the world based on nothing, right? Based on something as insubstantial as like the pigment of her skin. Like you don't know her because of that. And I think that, but on the other side, I think there's great community to be found in identifying strongly with something. But I think it can be both freeing and also a prison.
Do you identify with anything specifically? I mean, identify as a dragon. Do you identify as anything?
I identify as a romantic goober.
Great. I love it. I love it.
You are a dragon.
So your book, you just discussed this, but it does raise all these questions about racial identity and conflict, and the conflicts within us, the tension, like you said, we have between us, between society, between our community. Does it provide any answers? Are there any answers?
No, I mean, I don't have the answers to these questions. They're impossible, right? But I do think that you have to ask them, right? Like the book is not meant to be prescriptive in any way, but one of the best things that I've been finding is that people want to talk after they get to the end of the book. They're absolutely calling their friends, and they're like, my friends have called me. My parents, oh my God. My parents have read every book, and it's fine. This one, my dad was on the phone. He's like, what is wrong with you? I was like, what's up, Dad? Everything's fine.
I remember getting to the end of the book, and you know that like mind blown emoji? Yeah. That was me at the end of this book, and I called and I was like, and then the emotions came.
Right. Yeah. Like people have definitely been having big feelings, but what I really appreciate is that people are talking about it, right? Like they want to talk, they want to know, why did you end it this way? Which is the question in this book, is why did I end it this way? And that's what I want people to talk about.
So let's talk a little bit about the research you did for this book. One, did you do research for this book? Yeah. And I guess, this book is in a large part about a Black utopia. Did you find that in literature anywhere? Yeah,
I mean, there are actually some Black utopias, like towns that have existed. And I mean, to be clear, all utopias fail, right? Like not just the Black, like all of them. But the ones in America, they have all failed, mostly from outside pressures, right? So like mostly like our country's ridiculous and has smashed these like utopias, but also because people are flawed, right? You can't get a large group of people living in like a commune to agree on anything for that much time and all want the same thing, right? So utopias are problematic, as the kids say. So I did do some research. It's kind of sad because you're so idealistic, but it doesn't work. Like I think we're meant to live in smaller groups, maybe.
Yeah. Bands of hunter-gatherers wandering the countryside. So your previous books have been sort of these beautiful, award-winning, romantic stories. This one is quite different. Were you nervous writing a book about, with such huge ideas about racism in America?
Yes, definitely. Because the world is ridiculous. Because people are very online. So, I mean, I'll say just honestly as a writer, like what happens is people read your work and some people read it in the spirit it was intended and generously and actually read it, and some people don't. But to put things into the world is to open yourself up to like criticism and misinterpretation. And so there's that sort of personal, just like Nikki side of it, just like, oh my God, what's going to happen when you put like the work out there? And then, it is a sensitive topic, and I really do want people to be thoughtful when they engage with it's a thriller, and you will read it as such, but also it is, like Get Out. It is it's like a social horror, a social thriller. It does have big ideas in it, and I desperately want people to think about them.
Was there a moment as you're writing or as you're editing where you realize like, oh, I'm about to let this go, and now it's not mine anymore, it kind of belongs to the reader?
Yeah, I mean, it's so terrible when you have to let it go, but eventually, after...
Speaking of horror.
Because you only revise it for so long, right, before they will take it away from you and just like, well, we have to print this now, we have to publish it. And then every time you look at it, you can think of something else you could have said or changed or whatever. The hardest part of writing this book was writing the end of it. And you will see why once you read it. But I wrote it so many times because I knew I had to earn the ending. Like the entire book is in service of the end. Like I had to make it so that you believe the end. And so it took me a long time to get it right. And I wrote it, seriously 100 times. And I shied away from it because it was a hard ending to write. And but when I was done, I knew I was done. Like I never make myself cry, even in the sad parts. But this book, I was like, like it was
Release,
it was like a really, really deep breath, and then I knew I was done. But it took a long time to get there. I don't want to read it or touch it or change anything anymore. I'm done.
Yeah, fair. I mean, now it's through, so you can't.
Yeah, now I'm screwed.
So why an adult novel at this time? And people ask this a lot, so I actually would love to hear your answer. What is the difference between an adult book and a young adult book now that you've done both?
What is the difference? So I will say that I didn't know I was writing an adult book until I was writing an adult book, right? So I don't have like plans. I'm like, I have the idea in my head. I see the character or whatever, and then it becomes the book. I mean, you know this too. Like, the labels are on the business side, right? So it's like where someone decides to shelve it, but it's not so much to do with the art making. Like, we are just writing, and then it fits into a category. I didn't know I was going to write a thriller until I was writing a thriller, right? Like, I had no idea.
Why did you decide to write a thriller? Now that we're on the topic, you have written 3 romance novels. So
I have. It just is a thriller, Like, it was inspired by the Stepford Wives, and I really am shallow. I'm like a shallow person.
You are not shallow. She is not shallow. She's a very deep and lovely person. Don't sell yourself short.
No, I mean, when it comes to I really like, it has to, my favorite books are plotty, like you can't stop reading them, but also are philosophical. And that's the stuff I love reading. And so I was definitely going to write that, right? Like if I was talking about this, I really wanted to pull you along with me. Like you can't help but read it, but also have you be thinking about it too. Like those are my favorite books.
So one of the things that I like, one of the reasons why I write what I write is because it's actually really fun to write. It's fun to dream up. Yeah. Was this book fun for you to write at any point, or was it just very sort of thinky?
That is a great question, Sabaa.
Thank you.
It was like a fever dream writing this book. Like that 6 weeks, I couldn't stop. Like, I mean, I was compulsive about it. Like I don't know if I talked to my husband, and he definitely fed our child. So this one was, I just had to write it. So I don't know, fun is not the word, I guess. I just had to. And
it was like all-consuming kind of?
And it's a book I couldn't have written 5 years ago Like, I don't think I was a good enough writer, just craft-wise. Like, I needed to write all the other books. And I don't mean, like, I don't think my other books are poorly written, because I don't think that. I think they're all right.
They're great.
But I think I had to write all the other things to be able to write this one, right? And also, I had been thinking about all these ideas for such a long time, and that this was just the moment to do it. Like, I couldn't have done it in another moment. This was the one. So, yeah, it's not fun so much as like I was just compelled.
So we go into our books and we have a sense of what we want the philosophy to be or what we want the themes to be. Do you hope that there's anything your readers get out of this book? Is there anything specific you would want them to take away from this book?
Yeah, I mean, more than I think the other ones, like, this book is definitely, people are talking about it. And I think one of the things that's missing from our national sort of discourse about race is a sense of grace when we talk to each other. Like, I think there's a way in which we assume the worst of the person on the other end of a conversation. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, because some people really are terrible and don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. But most people do. I think most people will do the right thing if they know what the right thing is. And I mean, I have been in conversation with friends where I have made mistakes and I have made assumptions and said the wrong thing. And my saving grace is that they know that I love them and I'm just dumb, right?
Like that one time you told, no, I'm just
right. And then there was that one time when you, But I mean, for real though, right? I mean, that's the only thing that's saved me, is that they know I love them and I don't mean it, and they haven't assumed that I meant the worst. And similarly, it's happened to me where someone has been dumb and said something silly or whatever, and I'm like, no, and then we move on because I know we have a relationship. And I think that's the only way things change, really, right? I think that the only way, it's like me and you in a room connecting, talking about things, and genuinely listening. And genuinely be willing to have your mind changed or expanded or whatever. And I think that grace is really missing from our conversations. Like, I just think we assume so much that people don't mean or mean badly now. And I want that to stop.
Do you think that is generational, out of
I
curiosity?
think it's social media.
Social media.
I think
yeah.
it's such trash. Like, I am not very online, and
But you love Twitter. I'm joking. She hates Twitter. I left Twitter, so I don't care about Twitter anymore.
You quit Twitter.
I quit Twitter. Best day of my life.
Seriously. It's just, I mean, it's not really real, right? I mean, like, people, like, will burn bridges down. Like, okay, I'll tell you something fairly personal. So my husband is Korean American. We've been married for 22 years. But when we first got married, he's the best thing, really. Oh, my God. Well, thank you. He's the best, though. So we've been married for a long time, but when we first got married, his parents disowned him, and he was disowned for 10 years. And that was it was hard, right? Like, there's no way around that. But eventually they did come around, and now his mother loves me, like, to death. And here's the thing, she is still also racist, but she adores me, and she adores her grandchild. And that is a real complexity. That's real human emotion. On Twitter, people are like, no, you get rid of that person, just burn it all down. I'm like, that's crazy. That's not how people work, right? Like, we live with contradiction all the time. I adore my mother-in-law, and also she's totally racist. I mean, she is, and that's just true. And you know that you work with it, you live with it, and I think that's real, and I think social isn't, right? Like, and I think that's what's wrong with our discourse too. It's just like we pretend that everything is black and white and so simple, and it really isn't. And then what good would it do to get rid of my kid's grandmother and my husband's mom? And we would never know. We would never get to this place where, like, she really thinks I'm the best thing. She's so proud. And she loves her granddaughter so much, right? And it's never either or, it's both and, right? And your life is better for it. Yeah.
So you have had now 4 books. This is your 4th. Tell us about your writing journey, if you will, and then that'll be my last question for you, and then we'll open it up to everyone else.
Let's see, my writing journey. So I started with young adult books, and I still have a young adult book coming out in 2026, so I'm not stopping. And hopefully I get to keep doing this job, right? Because I like it. I used to have this.
You also have some small skill in the area, so I feel like that's working for you.
You are sweet. But you know this already, but I used to work in finance. I had the worst job, you guys, like the worst job. I did analysis and I worked on a trading desk, and my job was to get yelled at by very wealthy guys, like on a daily basis. And all because I was good at math in high school. It's terrible. Anyway, so in 2015, I had the idea for Everything, and we had saved up all this money, and I decided to quit and try and hope that it worked out, and then it worked out.
Sure did.
But for a long time, we would drive by my old building in Los Angeles, and I was convinced that I was going to have to go back there. I would have dreams about having to go back to work there. So that was in 2015, May 22nd, 2015. And then Everything became a movie, and so then that was nice because then I got to keep writing. And then The Sun is Also a Star, and that became a movie. And then Instructions for Dancing, which no one knows I wrote, but I know.
So good.
It's really good.
Oh, thank you.
But she's super mean in it, just between us. There is a point in that book where I called her and I was like, really? I'm the worst, but really?
I mean, okay. Sabaa is being really funny because her books are ridiculous with that. So Sabaa wrote an Ember in the Ashes series, and she won the National Book Award for All My Rage, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And it's so beautiful. And I've read many versions of that book and love them all. But also about being mean to your characters. It's what writing is, right? You put your characters through their paces. Anyway, I think I lost track. That's my journey to writing.
It's an excellent journey. And as one of our mutual friends once said, there's these moments in also this book where I was reading it, and as a reader, I was like, oh my God. But as a writer, I was like, slow clap. Right? Well done. So thank you for the conversation, and we would love questions.
Yay. Thank you, Sabaa.
Don't be shy.
Hi, my name's Emily. It's my first time.
Say your name again.
Emily.
Emily. Yeah.
So my question is, coming back from Instructions to Dancing, I think we know the question is, why'd you kill the main protagonist guy? Hey, do you know how hard it is to find an actual real man besides your husband, who is amazing? I love his work. That's why we go into books to feel, because that's for us, to find actual love and actual men in the book. No offense to all the men who are here. I cried. Why did you do that? Why?
Okay, so did everyone hear? Yes. Okay, so the thing, when I had my little girl, right? Do you know the cliche about your heart existing outside of your body, right? So I had her, and I felt like that. How was I supposed to let her go to preschool? And actually, when I met David, also when we got together, I was like, oh, I have the love of my life. And if he would go out and not call or be a little late, I was convinced he'd been hit by a truck, right? I was just like, oh, I found the love of my life. Now he's gonna die, right? That's I'm fatalistic in that way that I would think that. And so the book is a lot about love is great and wonderful and transformative, and it's the reason the world works, right? But it also makes you really vulnerable because loss is inevitable, right? Like in some way. And I think a lot of the question in that book is it worth it? Like, is like having a big love worth the pain of loss that is sometimes, or in all cases, inevitable? So that's what, and I wrote it when my mom was super sick. And I wrote most of that book in a hospital, honestly, like by her like a bedside when she was going through cancer treatments. And I wrote, and when I had the idea for that, she was like, we weren't sure she was going to make it, and I kept thinking about how much I loved her, and I was going to lose her, and I wanted to not feel that. Like, I wanted not to feel love because I was like, it would be easier. I mean, but that's just not how human beings work, right? So, but that's why. Yeah.
I guess that's a good one.
Yeah, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
I drove 30 to 40 minutes to see you, but these two who I met when I got here came down from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to see you. So,
Thank you,
yeah.
thank you. I mean, I really, really appreciate
Okay.
it. Thank
My
you.
question regarding your Black Utopia community, do you think it is like the Greenwood and Tulsa community that was burned down to the ground, but before that it had the Black doctors, the lawyers, the stores, the churches, and all of that?
Yeah.
Would you say your utopia is like that one?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this utopia is it's super, super wealthy on purpose, right? Because I think we talk about race a lot, and we don't talk about class a lot, and the ways in which we think that class can be protective. And sometimes it is, right? Like, I think sometimes wealth is really protective, but, if you are, say, a young Black boy and you're wearing your hoodie and you're walking down the street and there's a cop with a bad agenda, it does not matter how much money you have, right? So I wanted to talk about that. So I think it's a little bit different in that it's just, the houses start, like the cheapest house there is like $1 million, right, in this town, which I definitely did on purpose. And also it was kind of fun to write, just as selfishly as a writer, it was like really fun to write about these ridiculous, like over-the-top things, because I live in LA and I see these ridiculous over-the-top things all the time. I had a lot of fun writing the spa because have you ever read a spa menu? I looked up like the shishiest spas I could find, and then I looked at their menus and I read like all the treatments you can get. It's bananas. It's bananas. Like there's like sound beat therapy and there's like all this stuff and you're like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. So that was also sort of fun to write. But it's not quite that, right? Because I went a little bit over the top with it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. Did you say the main character was a public defender?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask why you decided to make her a public defender, because I'm working at the public defender's office in DC this summer, and so just interested. And I think there's really interesting conversations going on in public defense since 2020 until now. And also, if I could ask a second question, I wonder how this is a different book being released in 2024, but sort of being conceived of in 2020, how you think it's different than if it had been released in 2020 when we were reading so much literature about race in that particular moment.
Yeah, these are excellent questions. Love these questions. And it's funny because I had a profile in Elle magazine. I think it came out yesterday or something, and we talked about the second question. And I'll get to it, but it is very frustrating, like what happened in 2020 versus what's happening now. But I made Jasmyn a public defender because she's so rooted in her community and wanting to help. And so a lot of her clients, are kids from troubled backgrounds, and she's trying to get them off. And she's doing a good job. She feels very compelled to take care of her community and people who are who can be vulnerable to a system that's not taking care of them. And so it's just her personality. It's the job Jasmyn would choose because that's who she is. And then to the second part of your question, I think in 2020 there were all those protests. I remember protests going down like the streets, like by my house, with people that you never expect to see at these protests, right? Like so many people. And the bestseller lists were filled with books about race and racism, and people kept using that word. It's a reckoning, like things were going to change now.
Many promises were made.
Many promises were made. I mean, even in our industry, Sabaa, you know this. Like so many women, there were a couple. So there's Lisa Lucas, and and she's no longer at Pantheon, right?
Right.
And so many people were hired into these positions, and 4 years later, like we're rolling back so many of the DEI programs. It feels like it was a trend, which is a ridiculous thing to say because people's lives aren't trends, right? It feels like people got tired of.
I remember hearing an author say, a white author say, "When is this going to be over?"
Right. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. I mean, illustrative. I'm going to ask you who say that afterwards. When we go gossip.
You will not be surprised.
Right. But that's the kind of thing, right? Like I think that so many things are being rolled back now, and it feels like it's just this up and down, right? And that's wild. We have to just I would love to never have to talk about this ever again, right? Like it's not a trend. Like being fair and equal to people should not be something that is trendy one day and then we forget about it, or I get exhausted by it. I was like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I do think some of that is because of the way we talk about it, which is silly. But that's what, I feel that now. I feel like there's a backlash for sure. And I do think that in 2020, people seemed more open, or they said they were, and I think that's rolled back a lot.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm so happy to meet you. Like, I was gonna tell you over there, but you're my favorite author.
Oh, thank you. You were very kind.
So my question was kind of formulating at the beginning. There was something you said that resonated with me in the book. So she moves to this utopia and she expects everybody to be an activist. And I kind of wondered what your thoughts were about Black activism, like looking different for different people. Because for me personally, I'm from Alabama, and I went to 2 public white institutions while I was there, and I just graduated from Howard. And thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So it was, I just wanted to be Black in like a Black space. Yeah. I never felt like I was like an on the front lines type of activist. But when I got to Howard, it was just like, I felt like I was being pushed to be something that I never really fit in where I was before, and I didn't really feel like I fit in where I was. And I do think that being at Howard did a lot to change the way that I view things, because I was introduced to a lot of stuff that I wasn't introduced before from growing up in Alabama. But it was always just kind of what you said, like this contradiction or like this tension in myself. Like, I feel like I need to be this way, but this is who I am. And so I don't know, I just wanted to know what you thought about it looking different.
I understand exactly. I understand exactly what you're talking about. I think I have a few things. So there's the fact that Jasmyn goes to Liberty and assumes that everyone is going to be like her. Why? Because everyone's Black, right? So that is also a tension that's within Jasmyn. Like, why does she assume everyone's going to be the same? I think all movements require all different types of people, right? So I think you need the peaceniks, right? I think you need the artists for sure. I think you need the people who say burn it all down, right? And will like protest in the streets.
I remember we've talked about this because I was really sort of in a desperate place last fall about the concept of activism, and we had talked about, you had said that exact thing to me, and it made me really understand it better.
Right. I mean, because everyone is not an activist, right? Everyone is not an activist the way we all talk about it online now, right? But there are lots of different ways to do things, right? Like you could just write books, you could just donate your money, you could just volunteer and teach kids in like an underserved community or not. Like there are all these. You need everyone to do things, but I do think there is a way in which there's so much performative stuff that happens online or even in like spaces. Are you doing enough? What are you doing? You have to think this way. You have to be this way. But it isn't true, really, right? And like you just do good, right? But you don't have to tell everyone about it. You certainly don't have to post about it. But you can just do good, and you can do it in a small way or in a big way. It's always required all types of people to make anything change. And I honestly think that this is part of it, right? Like I think all of us sitting here talking about it and like being honest and genuinely listening to each other is part of it. Like I think that is how things change. And I think that is a kind of activism too, right? Anyway, it's worth asking the question, what can I do? Can I do better? Can I do this? But you can also go get a massage. It's okay, right? And the book really is about what true freedom is. Like, how do you get to be like really free? Like when you walk into a room, you can be anybody outside of everyone else's assumptions of who you are, right? That's the thing I would like to throw off, right? Like you don't know anything about you when you walk into a room, but we think we do because your skin is brown, right? It's crazy. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Samantha. I am a huge fan of yours. Posted your stuff on social media. I know it's sort of cliche, but like I absolutely love your work.
I feel like I recognize your face.
Really? I was hoping you were going to say that.
No, I feel like I did.
I'll write down she said that.
I might. Your work is incredible. I love every single one of your books. Everything is literally, I might start cheering up, literally got me into reading. And the fact that you had so many love stories and twists and turns, like it made me view reading differently. The fact that there was
nice
all
to
that
hear.
stuff that happened and everything. I read maybe 20 pages of your book before I came here today. And as a white woman who was brought up pretty well off, I looked at race and, communities in such a different way. So I know you mentioned like wanting to make a difference, and it has already empowered me to view people and how we live and just communities differently. So
That's great.
I absolutely love you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank
Very
you.
grateful.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
I think time for like one or two more, if
Yeah.
anyone has.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Kaya. I'm really not that shy, so
Hi, Kaya.
yeah. Okay, so I do love you too. My friends are like very jealous at the moment, but okay. So my question was, what kind of was your thought process in having so many Black and other people of color in your books?
So many what?
Black and other characters of color, and kind of just like, did you feel like you were in a place where you were conflicted, including more white characters so that it's quote unquote more profitable? Or like kind of what was your reasoning why?
Yeah. So I definitely wanted it to be about Jasmyn's journey in this community, right? I wanted it to be, and it's a Black utopia, so then everyone had to be Black. But if you ask me what the book is really about, it's about what it means to be free, really. And that means free from the stereotypes of the overarching system, but also free from the ones that we're forced to build for ourselves because of the overarching system. So in terms of being nervous of not having more characters, I mean, it just didn't serve the story. Like, this is the story, right? The story is what does it mean to be free? Like, and do you know Isabel Wilkerson? She wrote that book, Caste. Okay, so Caste is great, and she talks about this metaphor where there's a house, right? And we're all in the house. And we didn't build the house, we're all in it. And the house is broken, right? Like the basement's flooded, the windows are broken. The only thing to do is roll up your sleeves and fix it, right? Like, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, really, like, because we're here now, right? And so we have to live here. We got to roll up our sleeves and fix it. And so the book is really about that. Like there's this big system that's put us all into boxes and makes ourselves put ourselves into boxes because of the overarching system. And I wanted to illustrate that. And I want us to talk about it, and then talk to each other about it, and like hope that something changes. And in order to do that, the characters had to be the way they are. So it's always just in service of the story, you know. So, yeah, yeah.
Even if you had inserted a white couple who wanted desperately to be in that community, I think that would change the whole dynamic of the book.
Yeah.
Because I believe everybody would be looking at them, this couple, why are you here? And
Right.
then this couple's thinking, well, how come you can't accept me? You know, I
Right.
believe in everything
Right.
you are.
Yeah.
I believe in everything you do. I just want to be in your world. I think that changes or would change the whole dynamic.
Because it automatically centers them, and it's not
Right.
about them,
Yeah.
but it automatically forces it to
Right.
be about them. So
Right.
Good job.
Yeah. Right. The messaging would be, it'd be a different like theme or thesis, right? And like the thesis I had is like, let's look at this and what it means. So, yeah, I mean, if you just got to go where the story is, right? Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a great place to end it. Oh, do you?
No, yeah, go
Where
ahead.
do you get your inspiration from?
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
Can you see the question in the mic?
Oh, yeah. So the question is where I get my inspiration from. And I have a notebook, and you should answer this too, Sabaa. But I have a notebook, and I write all my ideas down into this book. And some of them I keep going back to, and some of them I never think of again. And so that's where, like, the ones that I keep coming back to, there's something there. So maybe I'll write, like, a bad poem about it, or, like, a short story, or they become books. But, like, I don't know. I know I write them down, but where they're from, I have no idea. Genuinely, it's just like, that's interesting. And then, you know, like, I'll go home after this tour and I'm on deadline for my next book. And then after I'm done with that, I won't write or anything, and I'll just consume things. And then, you know, you just sort of get ideas and stuff like that. Where do your ideas come from, Sabaa, Tahir?
A lot of them come from news stories. So I was a copy editor here at the Washington Post for many years, and that meant I worked late at night, which meant I read all the and I was on the international desk, so I read about war and death and bombings, and it was during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So it was basically reading about. I'm Muslim, so I was reading about my people getting destroyed by the country I lived in every single day. And actually my the next book I have coming out has this whole aerial bombardment in it, an outside force just bombing the out of a place. And that was in part inspired by the United States bombing of northwest Pakistan, which is where my family is from. So it's weird how stuff will come back. I mean, that went on all the way, until I think a few years ago. But I started thinking about it back in 2003, and it just now made its way. So, does stuff come back to you from years ago, and then it kind of finds its way into a book?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have written this book even 5 years ago. The stuff just builds, and it comes out in a stew. It's like a fine stew. But yeah, I mean, some of the ideas in this book I had when I was a child. Like that Toni Morrison quote, I heard it when I was a kid. And it really, I think, has changed me. It profoundly affected me. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing so much of yourself in this and in the book, and I hope everyone gets to read it and loves it as much as I did.
Yes. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for coming out, and thank you to Sabaa Tahir. And once more, Sabaa is a National Book Award winner.
She's my
Her
hype
book,
lady.
When I first read An Ember in the Ashes, I sat my child in front of TV when she was teeny so that I could finish it. And I was a bad mom for 2 days straight so I could finish it. Right, and Ember in the Ashes is her series. The National Book Award winner is called All My Rage, one of my favorite books of all time. And she has a new series starting October. Is it out in October? It's called Air. I can never say that word, so you say
I
it.
know, it's just Air, H-E-I-R.
Right.
Air.
I will not steer you wrong. She's brilliant.
This is true love. This is why it was true love.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you, Sabaa.